Commander Vexcara sat in the cold metal chair of the observation deck, staring at the glowing data pad in front of them. The blue light reflected off their dark eyes as they read through another routine assignment. After 28 years of watching alien species fight each other, they thought they had seen everything the galaxy had to offer. The assignment looked simple enough. A new species had joined the galactic community just 6 months ago. They called themselves humans and came from a small blue planet called Earth, way out on the edge of the Milky Way. Nobody had paid much attention to them at first. Their technology was basic, their ships were slow, and their weapons seemed almost primitive compared to what the advanced races used. But now the humans wanted to join the Galactic Defense Alliance. They needed someone to watch them fight and write a report about how good they were in battle. That someone was Vexcara. Vexcara belonged to a race called the Zeftai. They were known throughout the galaxy for being calm, logical, and never letting emotions cloud their judgment. Perfect for watching battles and writing fair reports. Vexcara had done this job for dozens of different alien races. They knew what to expect. The test would take place on a mining planet called Epsilon 7. Some raiders called the Court Hacks had been attacking the mining stations there for weeks. The humans had volunteered to drive them away. It would be a good chance to see how they fought when things got dangerous. Vexcara looked at the numbers on their screen. The human force was small. Only about 200 soldiers led by someone called Colonel Kim. The Court Hacks had almost 600 fighters, better weapons, and knew the planet well. By all logic, this would be a very short fight. The humans would probably retreat after the first day, maybe 2 if they were stubborn. The Zeftai commander packed their recording equipment and observation tools into a small ship. The flight to Epsilon 7 would take 3 days. During the trip, Vexcara studied everything they could find about humans. The information was limited, but what they read was not impressive. Humans had only discovered faster-than-light travel 50 years ago. Their weapons still used solid projectiles instead of energy beams. Their armor was thick and heavy instead of lightweight force fields. Their ships looked like flying metal boxes compared to the sleek vessels other races built. Everything about them seemed backward and crude. When Vexcara reached Epsilon 7, they set up their observation station high above the planet. From orbit, they could see everything that happened on the surface. Their advanced sensors could pick up individual voices and track every soldier's movements. They activated the recording systems and settled in to watch what they expected would be a quick human defeat. The planet below was rough and rocky, covered in deep valleys and tall cliffs. The mining facilities were scattered across the northern continent, connected by roads that wound between the mountains. The Court Hacks had taken control of most of the mines and were using them as bases to launch more attacks. Colonel Kim's human forces had landed on the southern part of the continent. Vexcara could see them setting up their equipment and preparing for battle. They moved slowly and carefully, checking their weapons and talking to each other in quiet voices. They seemed calm, but Vexcara had seen many species appear calm before their first real fight. The Court Hacks were different. They were big, aggressive creatures with thick scales and sharp claws. They had been raiding and fighting for centuries. Their weapons were powerful, and they knew how to use the planet's rocky terrain to their advantage. They had defeated 3 other species who tried to remove them from Epsilon 7. As Vexcara watched the humans prepare, they noticed something unusual. Most species would spend days planning their attack, running computer simulations, and trying to find the safest approach. The humans did some planning, but they also spent a lot of time doing other things. Some of them were writing letters. Others were looking at small pictures they carried with them. A few were even singing quietly to themselves. This behavior puzzled Vexcara. Why waste time on such things when death might come tomorrow? The logical approach was to focus entirely on tactics and strategy. But the humans seemed more interested in connecting with each other than in studying battle plans. Vexcara watched soldiers share food, tell stories, and laugh together around small fires. They acted more like a family gathering than a military force preparing for war. As the sun set on Epsilon 7, Vexcara made their first notes in the official report. They wrote about troop numbers, weapon types, and terrain advantages. But they also found themselves writing questions they had never asked before. What made these humans so relaxed before battle? Why did they seem more concerned with each other than with the enemy they would face tomorrow. The HFY commander settled back in her chair and prepared to watch what they believed would be a brief, one-sided fight. They had no idea that in the next few days, everything they thought they knew about war, courage, and what it meant to be alive would be completely destroyed. Tomorrow, the real lesson would begin. The attack began just after sunrise. Vexcara watched through their sensors as the Korthak raiders moved down from the mountains in 3 large groups. They had good weapons, strong armor, and they knew exactly where the humans were camped. This should have been easy for them. The human soldiers saw them coming. Colonel Kim's voice came to the radio, calm and steady. All units, contact front. Remember your training and watch out for each other. Vexcara expected the humans to fall back to better positions, maybe call for help, or at least look scared. Instead, something strange happened. A small group of human soldiers, led by Sergeant Lee, found themselves cut off from the main force. The Korthaks had surrounded them on 3 sides, and more enemies were coming from behind. Any smart military commander would order an immediate retreat. The soldiers could escape to the mountains and rejoin their friends later. But Sergeant Lee did something that made no sense at all. "We're not going anywhere," he said into his radio. "Find some rocks, dig in deep, and make these raiders wish they never came here." Vexcara stared at their screen in confusion. The humans were not retreating. They were moving forward toward the enemy, even though they were outnumbered 5-1. One of the human soldiers, a young man called Private Park, did something that completely broke every rule of warfare Vexcara knew. He took apart some of his own ammunition and mixed it with explosives from the mining equipment scattered around the area. He made a bomb with his bare hands. Then Private Park did something even more impossible. He picked up his homemade bomb and ran straight at the largest group of Korthak soldiers. They shot at him, but he kept running. When he reached them, he set off the explosion. The Korthak position was destroyed. Private Park did not survive. What happened next changed everything Vexcara thought they understood about intelligent life. The other human soldiers did not panic when they saw their friend die. They did not run away or surrender. Instead, they became more dangerous. Corporal Choi, with tears running down her face, picked up Park's weapon and charged toward the next enemy position. She was screaming something in the human language that sounded like anger and sadness mixed together. For Park, for all of them, the translator told Vexcara. She was saying, this made no logical sense. Losing a soldier should make a unit weaker, not stronger. But the humans seemed to fight harder every time one of them fell. They drew power from their losses instead of being weakened by them. Over the next few hours, Vexcara watched the humans do impossible things. When their weapons broke, they fixed them with spare parts and rocks. When they ran out of ammunition, they threw stones with deadly accuracy. When their communication equipment was destroyed, they used hand signals and shouted at each other across the battlefield. Most amazing of all, they never abandoned each other. Vexcara watched a human medic named Song run into enemy fire 6 times to rescue wounded soldiers. Each time she went out, the enemy shot at her more heavily. Each time, she came back with another injured comrade. On her 7th trip, she was hit by enemy plasma fire, but she still managed to push the wounded soldier to safety before she collapsed. The Korthaks were getting frustrated. They had fought many different species before, and they always followed the same pattern. Attack hard, cause some casualties, and the enemy would either retreat or surrender. It was simple and effective, but the humans would not follow the pattern. They kept fighting even when they should have given up. They turned every rock and crater into a fortress. They made weapons out of garbage. They sang songs while they loaded their guns. On the 2nd day, Lieutenant Jin's group of soldiers had been surrounded for 18 hours. They had no food, little water, and almost no ammunition left. The Korthaks had them trapped in a small valley with no way to escape. By every rule of warfare, they should have surrendered to save their lives. Instead, as the sun began to set and the final Korthak attack prepared to begin, Vexcara heard something that made their blood run cold. The humans were singing. Lieutenant Jin's voice rose clear and strong over the sound of weapons fire. Soon other voices joined him. Even as plasma bolts flew over their heads, even as their defensive positions crumbled around them, They sang an ancient song from their home world. The translator called it Arirang, a melody about missing home and never giving up hope. Vex Kara had watched 47 different species face death in battle. They had seen aliens weep, rage, beg for mercy, and accept their fate with dignity. But they had never seen any species face extinction while singing songs about hope. These humans were not just fighting a battle. They were doing something else entirely, something that Vex Kara's analytical mind could not understand or classify. They were turning warfare into something beautiful and terrible at the same time. For the first time in 28 years of military observation, Vex Kara's hands shook as they tried to write their report. The song echoed across the valley like a ghost from another world. Lieutenant Jin's voice was strong and clear, even though he had not eaten in 2 days and had bandages wrapped around his left arm. The other soldiers joined in, their voices mixing together in a melody that seemed to make the very air around them feel different. Vex Kara listened to the translation of the words. The song was about a mountain pass back on Earth, about people who had to leave their homes but promised to return someday. It was about missing the people you love and never losing hope, even when everything seems lost. Why were they singing about home when they were about to die? The observer watched through the sensors as the surrounded humans prepared for what would certainly be their last battle. But instead of spending their final hours in fear or despair, they were taking care of each other. Corporal Han had been badly wounded by shrapnel in both legs, but he was still working. He used broken pieces of metal and rock to build better cover for his friends, even though he could barely walk. Private Kim shared his last piece of food with a soldier who was too injured to move. Sergeant Moon gave her extra ammunition to others, keeping only a few bullets for herself. They acted like they were getting ready for a family dinner, not preparing to fight until they died. When Han's rifle finally broke completely, he did not throw it away or give up. Instead, he began collecting stones from the ground around him. Vex Kara watched in amazement as Han threw the rocks with incredible accuracy, hitting Korthak's soldiers from over 100 meters away. Each stone was thrown not to save himself, but to protect his wounded comrades. The most incredible thing Vex Kara saw was Medical Officer Song. Even though she had been shot in the shoulder and was bleeding badly, she kept running across the dangerous open ground to rescue fallen soldiers. The Korthaks saw what she was doing and focused their fire on her. Every trip became more dangerous than the last. On her 17th rescue mission, Song was hit by 3 plasma bolts at once. Vex Kara watched her fall and expected her to stay down. But Song crawled the last 10 meters to reach a wounded Marine, push him behind a rock where he would be safe, and only then did she allow herself to collapse. She died with a smile on her face, knowing she had saved another life. Vex Kara tried to write down what they were seeing, but the words would not come. How could they explain soldiers who became stronger when their friends died? How could they describe warriors who cared more about saving others than surviving themselves? The Zeftai language had no terms for this kind of behavior. That night, Vex Kara could not sleep. They kept replaying the day's events, trying to understand what they had witnessed. In all their years of observing warfare, they had never seen anything like this. Other species fought to win, to survive, to gain something valuable. The humans seemed to be fighting for something completely different. On the 3rd day, Captain Yoon's engineering team received an order that should have been simple. They needed to destroy a bridge to stop Korthak reinforcements from reaching the main battle. The team set up their explosives and prepared to detonate them from a safe distance. But the remote detonator failed to work. The Korthaks were only minutes away. If they crossed that bridge, they would surround the remaining human forces and end the battle quickly. Someone needed to stay behind and trigger the explosives manually. It would be a death sentence. Captain Yoon looked at his 5 team members. They were all young, with families back on Earth waiting for them to come home. He was older, and his children were already grown up. "Get out of here," he told his team. "That's an order." "Sir, we can draw lots, or we can all stay and dash," began one of his engineers. "No," Yoon said firmly. "You have people who need you to come home. Go now before it's too late." His team tried to argue, but Yoon pushed them toward the evacuation route. As they reluctantly retreated, Vex Kara heard him activate his communication device one last time. "Tell my family I was thinking of them at the end," he said quietly. "Tell them I'm proud to serve with people like you." Then he detonated the explosives. The bridge collapsed in a massive explosion that could be seen from orbit. Captain Yoon was at the center of the blast. The Korthak reinforcements were stopped, but Yoon did not survive to see his sacrifice save hundreds of his fellow soldiers. When his engineering team heard the news, they did not break down in grief. Instead, they picked up their tools and worked twice as hard, carrying something in their eyes that Vex Kara had never seen before. It was not anger or sadness, but a kind of burning determination that seemed to light them up from the inside. Vex Kara stared at their observation screens and realized something terrifying. They were not watching a military engagement anymore. They were watching something that their species had no name for, something that transformed ordinary beings into something far greater and more dangerous than any weapon technology could create. These humans did not just fight wars. They made war into art. On the fourth morning, everything changed. Vex Kara watched through their sensors as 3 massive Korthak ships landed on the planet's surface. Hundreds of fresh enemy soldiers poured out, armed with the best weapons and eager for battle. The raiders now had over 800 fighters, while the humans had fewer than 80 soldiers left who could still fight. The mathematics were simple and brutal. 10 Korthak warriors for every human. The logical outcome was obvious to anyone with military training. The humans should surrender immediately to save the lives that remained. Colonel Kim's response came through the radio, calm as if he was ordering breakfast instead of facing certain death. "We dig deeper." Vex Kara's hands trembled as they adjusted their observation equipment. In 3 decades of watching alien warfare, they had never heard anything so quietly terrifying. The humans were not going to retreat. They were not going to surrender. They were going to make their final stand right here, outnumbered 10-1, with broken weapons and almost no ammunition left. What followed challenged everything Vex Kara believed about the nature of intelligent life. Private Kang's rifle had been destroyed in the morning's fighting. His ammunition was completely gone. Any reasonable soldier would find a place to hide and wait for the end. Instead, Khan began building traps from the wreckage of destroyed equipment. He used broken metal, damaged electronics, and even pieces of his own armor to create deadly surprises for the advancing Korthaks. He was not building these traps to escape or to win the battle. He was building them to make sure that every enemy soldier who wanted to advance would have to pay a price in blood. Sergeant Ryu had been shot 3 times and was losing a lot of blood. He could barely stand, but he spent his remaining strength doing something that made no military sense. He gathered all the ammunition he could find and distributed it to other soldiers, keeping none for himself. When Private Lee tried to give him some bullets back, Ryu shook his head. "You can still shoot straight," he said with a weak smile. "Make every bullet count for all of us." The most impossible moment came when pilot Sue received her final orders. Her fighter had been badly damaged in the previous day's air battles. The engines were failing, the weapon systems were offline, and the aircraft could barely stay in the sky. The logical choice was to land immediately and try to survive on the ground. Instead, Sue calculated the exact trajectory needed to crash her dying fighter into the Korthak command ship. Vex Kara watched in horror as she activated her communication system one last time. Her voice was steady and peaceful, as if she was saying goodnight to her children instead of preparing to die. "This is for everyone we couldn't save," she said. "Tell Earth that we remembered who we were until the very end." The observer watched Sue's fighter dive toward the massive enemy vessel. The Korthaks fired everything they had at her, but she kept her aircraft steady and true. The explosion when she hit their command ship was visible from 3 continents away. The entire Korthak leadership was destroyed in that single moment of sacrifice. Vex Kara's analytical mind, trained for decades to remain calm and objective, finally shattered. They were no longer watching a battle between 2 military forces. They were witnessing something that transcended warfare itself. The humans had transformed a hopeless fight into something approaching the sacred. As the day continued, the remaining humans performed acts that defied every survival instinct. Medical Officer Park, the last medic alive, used his own blood to help wounded soldiers when they ran out of medical supplies. Engineer Cho rigged the power generators to overload, creating a massive explosion that would take out dozens of enemies when they finally overran the human positions. Most incredible of all was the way they faced their approaching death. There was no panic, no desperate attempts to flee, no breakdown of military discipline. Instead, they helped each other reload weapons, share their last drops of water, and told stories about their families back on Earth. Lieutenant Bay, who had not slept in 3 days, spent his final hours writing letters to the families of soldiers who had already died. He wanted to make sure that every parent, every spouse, every child would know that their loved one had died with honor and courage. As the sun began to set and the final Korthak assault prepared to begin, Vex Kara realized they were witnessing something that would haunt them for the rest of their life. These humans were not just dying in battle. They were transforming their deaths into something beautiful and terrible and utterly beyond the understanding of any other species in the galaxy. The Korthaks charged forward in a massive wave, confident that the last few humans would break and run. Instead, the humans stood up from their positions, raised their weapons, and began to sing again. This time it was not the sad song about missing home. This time they sang a battle song, full of power and defiance and love for each other. Vex Kara watched through sensors that were blurred by their own tears as the final battle began. They no longer cared about writing reports or military analysis. They only cared about bearing witness to something that changed their understanding of what it meant to be alive. The battle ended at dawn on the 5th day. Vex Kara sat in her observation chair, staring at the data screens that showed the final numbers. Human casualties, 146 out of 200 soldiers. Korthak casualties, 812 out of 812 raiders. Every single Korthak was dead. Every single one. The humans had lost almost 3/4 of their force, but they had achieved something that should have been impossible. They had completely destroyed an enemy that outnumbered them 4-1. By every rule of warfare that Vex Kara knew, the humans should have been wiped out in the first day. But the numbers told only part of the story. The real story was in what Vex Kara had witnessed over the past 5 days. As the morning sun rose over the battlefield, relief ships from Earth finally arrived. Vex Kara watched the 54 surviving humans stand among their fallen comrades. They were covered in dirt and blood, exhausted beyond measure, and wounded in ways that would take months to heal. But there was something in their faces that Vex Kara had never seen in any other species after a battle. Peace. They looked peaceful. Lieutenant Bay, now the highest-ranking survivor, limped forward to meet the rescue team. His left arm was in a makeshift sling, and he had bandages wrapped around his head, but he stood straight and tall. When the rescue commander asked for his report, Bay said something simple that made Vex Kara's heart skip a beat. "Mission accomplished, sir. The raiders will not bother anyone again. No boasting about their victory. No complaints about their losses. No anger or bitterness about the friends they had lost. Just quiet satisfaction that they had done what they came to do." Corporal Nam, one of the few medics who had survived, was already moving among the wounded, both human, and the few injured Korthaks who had been taken prisoner. She treated the enemy's soldiers with the same care she gave to her own people. When one of the rescued humans asked her why she was helping the raiders, her answer was simple: "Because they're hurt, and that's what we do." Vex Kara tried to write their final report, but the words would not come. How could they explain what they had seen? How could they describe warriors who fought not for victory or glory, but for something much deeper and more dangerous? For 3 days, Vex Kara worked on the report. They wrote and deleted thousands of words, tried to find a way to make the Galactic Council understand what humanity represented. Finally, they settled on words that felt inadequate but true. "The human species operates completely outside all known military doctrine," they wrote. "They do not fight for territory, resources, or even survival in ways that other species understand. They fight for concepts that our languages struggle to translate: honor, love, memory, and meaning. These humans transform warfare from a tactical exchange into something approaching art. They make their battles into expressions of their deepest values. They would rather die beautifully than live without purpose. Most disturbing of all, they become more dangerous as they suffer greater losses. Each fallen comrade makes them fight harder rather than weaker. This defies every psychological model we have for intelligent behavior. But even these words felt wrong to Vexcara. They were trying to describe something that could not be captured in military reports or scientific analysis. The truth was simpler and more terrifying. The humans had shown them what it really meant to be alive. Vexcara submitted their report to the Galactic Council with a personal recommendation that changed everything. Humanity should be granted immediate full membership in the Galactic Defense Alliance. Any species that encounters them in battle should understand that they are not fighting soldiers. They are fighting poets who have chosen violence as their art form. More importantly, any species that has humans as allies will never need to fear being abandoned or betrayed. These beings will die before they break their promises. 3 weeks later, Vexcara received new orders. They were being promoted and offered their choice of the most prestigious observation assignments in the galaxy. Instead, they submitted a request that shocked their superiors. They asked for immediate retirement. Vexcara could not go back to watching ordinary battles after what they had seen on Epsilon 7. They could not return to clinical analysis of warfare after witnessing humans turn combat into something sacred. They spent the rest of their long life on a quiet planet at the edge of the galaxy, writing poetry about courage and sacrifice, and the terrible beauty of beings who chose meaning over safety. Sometimes, late at night, they would play recordings of the humans singing their battle songs. They would remember Lieutenant Jin's voice carrying across the valley, Pilot Sue's final words before her sacrifice, and Captain Yoon's message to his family. The humans had not just won a battle on a distant mining world. They had revealed something about the nature of consciousness itself, something that most species never discovered and some were not brave enough to face. They had shown that some things are worth dying for, and that dying for them makes you more alive than simply surviving ever could. Vexcara never forgot that lesson.